Good evening. Thank you guys for all joining us. We'll begin shortly. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hey, Victoria. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, Ms. Barbara. I see you on in the chat. Let us know how you guys are having, how your week's been. Let me know in the chat how you guys been enjoying Financial Literacy Week with Habitat. Don't be shy. Hey, hey, hey. Good evening. Good evening. Yes. I'm glad you've been enjoying it. Yes, Ms. Raquel. I've seen you on some chats, Ms. Raquel. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you've been enjoying it and been learning quite a bit. Definitely excited about you guys' feedback at the end of the week, but definitely I am glad you're enjoying it. And thank you for participating in our webinars. Good evening, Esperanza. Good evening. Yes, hectic week, right? It's Wednesday though. We're almost there, halfway through the week. Me and Kim were talking about it, but halfway through and we're having a good time. Yes, Ms. Green, learning a lot. We all have, even me. We're just wait a couple more minutes and then we'll have Kim join us and take over for planning for retirement. Thank you guys for your patience. And yes, Miss Barbara, great information in between work, and it is information that's free. So don't we love that? Yes, ma'am. You are correct. Amen to that. Let's wait for a few more people to join and we'll get started. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today. Again, my name is Christian Marquez. I'm a counselor with Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity. You have either been seeing me or my peers, Porfirio, Aretha, and Ms. Blaine on giving you guys some great information. We're glad you guys enjoying everything that we're talking about. And I'm glad that this Wednesday we get to have Ms. Kim talk about planning for retirement and how to make sure we're saving for our future. So with further ado, I'm going to let Ms. Kim introduce herself and we'll get this started.
Thank you. I am excited too. I know everyone's been learning a lot, and hopefully this is going to be valuable information to add to the great topics that you've already covered. So today we're going to be talking about planning for retirement, and for some of us that might seem like a long ways off, but you know, for others it may seem like it's coming a lot sooner. So at any rate, you know, regardless of how much time we have until retirement, there's definitely a lot of planning that goes into place, and we want to make sure that, you know, you're thinking about what are the things I need to know as I'm planning. So I'm going to cover this is kind of my agenda I'm going to run through today. Kind of talk about determining your retirement income needs. How do we do that? Saving for retirement, kind of the types of retirement savings plans. Talk a little bit about Social Security, because that's definitely something that's available for everyone as well. Distributions in retirement, kind of once we've accumulated that money, how we take the distributions, how do we pay ourselves? And then also something that's really important that we keep in mind as well is healthcare in retirement, and kind of how that impact will be on our savings as well. So let's get started. First, you know, when we think about determining our retirement income needs, this is kind of, you know, a personal equation. You know, how do we figure out how much we need to even save, or how much we're going to need when we get to retirement? And there's a lot of different factors that come into play. And the reality is that there's going to be some factors that we have complete control over. So things like I can control how much I am saving or how much I'm spending. So when I'm thinking about my budget and how I'm spending my money, I can control my own personal budget and budget out my savings amount. I have, control over, my employment. Obviously, if I can go, I go work somewhere, my earnings or my duration, how long I'm going to be at an employer, if I'm going to change employers. Those are some things we have, control or somewhat control. And then there's things that we certainly have no control over. So we have no control over the market returns. The good news is that long-term investing, markets perform nicely. They do have positives. There are time periods of short-term volatility. You don't want to get overwhelmed with the emotions of, volatility in the market, because those are short-lived. And when we're thinking about investing for a long time, it's kind of better just to, based on risk tolerance, be appropriately diversified and let that grow. But we don't have control over market returns. And then we don't have control over policies regarding things like taxation, savings, and benefits. So for example, if the government wanted to change how 401ks or IRAs are taxed, or their tax treatment, or if taxes go up in later years before we get to retirement, we have zero control over any of that. But it's just helpful to kind of keep in mind some certain things that and how we can kind of start planning for ourselves. So when we think about that, we need to think about what is my specific need. And really, and when I'm thinking about that, it's the lifestyle that I'm trying to replace. So am I going to kind of keep the same level of lifestyle that I have today? Or maybe, maybe when I retire, I'm going to plan to travel. Maybe I'm going to be pretty, leisure. I enjoy just going fishing and just keeping it, pretty simple. You think about what kind of expenses are going to change for you in retirement. Hopefully, when we get to retirement, we don't have debt. Right? That's going to be the ultimate goal. We could do a great job of saving enough for retirement, but it doesn't do us much good if we're carrying a lot of debt with us to retirement. So you want to think about, hopefully, we're paying off expenses, things like our homes are paid off, or car notes that we're not carrying, and credit card. You don't want to be carrying that kind of debt, but thinking about, how are my expenses going to change? Well, hopefully those are going to change. The other thing that's going to change when we retire is that amount that we budgeted for saving for retirement. Well, we no longer have to save for retirement when we get there, right? So if I've allocated a percentage of my income that goes to my savings for retirement, that's less of that amount that I need to budget, because now I'm using, I'm drawing from that for income. And once we kind of think about what that lifestyle is going to look like, how our expenses are going to change, and ultimately, we can kind of derive for, what's that income really going to be? How much am I going to need to sustain that? Then we kind of back into, what are my sources? Where is this going to come from? And Social Security, there's pension plans, 401k or 403b plans, or 457 plans if you work for a government entity. IRAs, personal savings, or maybe other things, like maybe I've got an inheritance, or maybe I've got some kind of assets, property, things like that I may also need to consider as part of my sources that could be used for retirement income. So then when we get there, we kind of take step one, if you will, how much income to replace. So first of all, I'm going to tell you that most Americans are going to need anywhere between 60 to 90% of their income replacement in retirement. So that means the amount of income that you have before you retire, we're going to want to replace about 60 to 90% of that. Now that's a broad difference, but that's because I mentioned lifestyle. Everybody's got a different lifestyle. If I want to keep things pretty much the same, if I'm going to have, lower expenses, no debt, keeping everything, just keep the lights on and be able to, put food in my pantry and, things like that, versus I want to travel, I want to do things, I want to see the world, then I'm going to need a little more. And then we have to think about, things kind of in a hierarchy of, what comes first. The first is going to be my needs. So determine the expenses first that we're going to need. Am I paying a mortgage? Hopefully not. Utilities, what's it cost to keep those lights on? Food, insurance, healthcare, and transportation. And then we kind of stack on top of that, what are my wants? So discretionary spending is going to be your wants: vacations, travel, entertainment, eating out, going shopping. Do I want the new iPhone every time it comes out? Things like that when we get into retirement discretionary spending. And then on top of that is our legacy. If we think about that, we would like to leave something for our grandchildren, if we want to, leave something to a nonprofit, there's also that component as well when we think about our personal kind of getting money in order and what our retirement looks like. The other thing we have to think about is the expectation of the age that we're going to be when we retire. So normal retirement age, typically we think about as age 65. This was the normal retirement age for Social Security. Like that was when you got your full benefits. Of course, that's changed for some of us now. But the expectation for many workers, that today would say, I plan to work till I'm 65. Now actually 67% of workers have said, I plan to work until I'm 65. There has been some folks that said, no, I plan to work later, or, maybe I'm going to continue to work part-time in retirement. That's certainly okay to consider as part of your planning. But some people think, I'd like to retire early. And so maybe my goal isn't to work to 65, maybe it's 60, maybe it's 55, whatever that looks like. Everyone's got a different goal. But what's kind of interesting about it is while 67% of people expected to continue working at least till age 65, the actual experience of retirees has been about 23% actually continue to work past 65. So that's a difference in, kind of the expectation versus what actually happened. And that's because different things can happen, right? Like we could be thinking about from 30 years from now, I think I'll work till I'm 65, but something could happen that could cause me to have to retire early. And some of those reasons could be maybe I just decided I wanted to do something else. I was sick of, checking in every day. I was ready to go. Maybe I was able to afford early retirement. I found out that while saving, I did a great job, and I was able to go ahead and retire. But there's also been other cases that weren't necessarily positive reasons, like being available to just go ahead and retire early, but maybe their skill was outdated. Maybe they had a family member or a spouse they needed to care for, and that meant leaving the workforce to be able to take care of them. Maybe, their company downsized and then it was really difficult to find other employment. And the most common reason why people leave retirement earlier than they expect is because of personal health problems or disabilities. So unfortunately, things can happen that cause us where we're unable to continue to work into retirement. So I share that with you just so you know, those are some things we also need to consider when we're thinking about planning. The what if. What if I can't fully continue to work that long? The other thing we have to consider is how much we need to, or how long we need to be paying ourselves in retirement. So during my retirement, I have to think about my life expectancy from the date that I retire until the day that I pass. How many years could I potentially need income? And for women, the life expectancy is 86.6 years. So on average, we women tend to live to see 86.6. Men have a slightly lower at 84.3, but still that's a long time. If we retire at 65, then we're going to be needing to pay ourselves 20 years for replacing of income in retirement. So if we're not going to work, where's that income going to come from? So now we can look at kind of where do we focus on how do we get this income replacement? And first, if you are employed with an employer that offers an employer-sponsored plan, That's going to be like a 401k plan. If it's a nonprofit, potentially you could have a 401k or a 403b plan. You may hear things like Roth or pre-tax. Those are both available inside a 401k or 403b plan. HSAs, health savings accounts, those are a great resource as well for retirement savings, specifically for healthcare costs. And then also 457 plans. Those could be something available to an employee of like a government entity. So that's where you want to start. Those are great opportunities for you to be able to set a pre-tax or Roth contribution from your payroll. It's kind of interesting. We've done a lot of studies to show that 80% of people that when the money hits their check, it's going to be spent somewhere. Even though we might have good intentions of saving it, it's more than likely if it hits my paycheck, I'm going to find some way that I need to spend it. So having that kind of already deducted from your check so that you don't see it, you don't feel that need or that, have that, have that ability to kind of go out and spend it on something else. It's a great way to save for retirement. And so I mentioned that you have that ability to kind of look at Roth or pre-tax. You can do the same thing in what's called an IRA. An IRA, which stands for Individual Retirement Account. Whether you have an employer-sponsored plan or not, this is something anyone can open up for themselves. So depending on your income, there's different, different abilities for your tax benefit here, but essentially you could put into on a pre-tax basis or on a Roth basis, which is basically where we're going to put it in after taxes. We're not going to get a tax deduction, but it will grow tax-free and ultimately come out tax-free in retirement. So that's kind of your second option to look at is employer-sponsored plan first. If I don't have one or I'm already maxing that out, maybe consider an IRA. And then, after that, we could look at other potential opportunities, things like annuities, some life insurance policies that have cash value, and then, potentially investments that have other tax favored options could be something to consider as well. The biggest benefit to retirement saving is to start early. So the one thing that is the most powerful tool that you could have in saving for retirement is that time value of money. So the longer that we are invested, then the better we're going to do from a return perspective. And if the same amount of money goes into a plan for someone's benefit, so this one's actually showing you an assumption that we have $100 contribution per pay period on a biweekly basis. If we do that for 20 years, we'll accumulate about $106,000. If we do that for 30 years, we're going to accumulate $245,000. So you see that in just 10 years longer, we actually end up, more than doubling. And if we do it for 40 years, so even young people who think, I'm in my 20s, I don't need to think about this, I've got so much time. I'm telling you, the best thing you can do for yourself is get started early because it makes such a big difference. 40 years of saving $100 biweekly would turn into $500,000, which is incredible. So just really get started as early as possible. It's never too late, but definitely it's never too early. It's always a good thing to start early. So I wanted to show you kind of a side-by-side. I mentioned some of the plans that you could look at, and I want to show you kind of the differences and how they actually work. So from an employer-sponsored plan, so for example, a 401k plan or a 403b plan, these plans are only available to employees that they're sponsored by an employer. You have, most plans do offer both pre-tax and Roth, but every one of these plans are going to certainly offer a pre-tax basis. You can contribute up to $20,500 actually. So 2022, it did increase. It's been $19,500 for the past couple of years, but for 2022, it's gone up. So you can put up to $20,500 pre-tax or Roth into one of these plans and have that just automatically drafted from your paycheck. An IRA, as I mentioned, an individual retirement account, you don't have as much ability to put in, but still you can put up to $6,000 into an account. And certainly, based on your income, you could have some tax benefit there for a pre-tax or potentially a Roth basis. And then Social Security. So I will say that I feel like before I started working in retirement, when I first started working and seeing Social Security taxes on my paycheck, and I remembered kind of hearing about Social Security, I just thought, well, that's just what everybody gets, Social Security. And so that should be enough, right? And the reality is that Social Security was never really meant to be that sole ability to retire. It was never meant to be that sole purpose for retirement, because it's really more like what we call the three-legged stool. So this is an old analogy that retirement is, made up of three pieces. One, Social Security being that one leg of that stool. The second, a retirement plan savings through your employer. And then the third being our own personal assets and savings outside of that. And so really for us to have a solid foundation of retirement savings, we really need to have all three components, and missing any of these pieces, of course, just like a stool that has three legs and one of them is not there or broken, it's not going to be stable. It's not going to hold you up. And so it's really important that while Social Security is a big part of this, it's not something that you can rely on to be your only income. So looking at just Social Security and sharing some facts. So 64 million Americans collect some form of Social Security, retirement, disability, or a death benefit. Payroll taxes that we pay, it's actually about 12.4%, 6.2% goes from the employee, and then your employer pays 6.2% in employer paid Social Security taxes. And that does go up to earnings of $137,700 per year. Now, in 2016, Social Security spent $15.7 billion more than it collected in taxes that year. So that's huge. We are drawing more out of Social Security every year than we are collecting in Social Security taxes. Also, there's a $2.8 trillion trust fund of all the kind of historic Social Security dollars that, by the way, didn't already get spent on other sources, that is expected to be depleted by the year 2034. So I don't know about you, but I do plan, I'm going to be retiring after the year 2035. Or 2034. So I'm a little nervous, like, is there going to be anything left for me? So, that should be something we all are concerned about. But if it's not replaced, the senior benefit could be cut as much as 21%. So, the average check that people collect today is not going to be enough in retirement. So if we cut that by another 21%, I think that makes it impossible for this to be your only income. Now, we still will have some sort of Social Security. We just can't rely on this to be everything. So that's why it's so important that we're considering doing part of this for ourselves. So full retirement age to be able to collect from Social Security, it's actually has changed a little bit. I mentioned 65 used to be the full retirement age. So now to collect full retirement benefits from Social Security, if you were born in 1943 to 1954, then 66 is the age that you would need to be able to get that full benefit. And then you'll see it kind of tapers down where you have kind of draw that carrot out, if you will, from 1955, 56, 57, all the way to 59, up until 1960 or later. Then full retirement age for you is 67. So, I think it's possible that we'll continue to see that carrot drag out, where we're going to have to wait longer to get full retirement benefits. But as of today, this is what it looks like. And so for most people, you're going to probably have to wait till you're 67 to be able to get full retirement benefits from Social Security. Now, the other thing, full retirement age I mentioned is age 67. That's to get 100% of the benefit. So if you actually go to socialsecurity.gov, you can log on and actually it'll pull up your records and it'll tell you a projection based on your, your income and kind of how the taxes you've been paying. It'll project out what it expects your income to be. So I do encourage you to find that out. But that's going to be based on full retirement, 100% of the benefit. Now, you could get less of that if you were to retire, say, anytime between the age of 62 and 67. So if you were part of those folks, like I said, in that example where, I had to leave working earlier than expected, then they may have had to go ahead and start drawing Social Security earlier than that full retirement age. And so basically the benefit that you get from Social Security, it actually ends up being about 6% less per year on that benefit. However, if you don't need that income at 67 and you want to delay it a few years to age 70, you can actually get more. It ends up being 124% of the benefit. And I'm sorry, the early is 70% of the benefit. It equates to -6% average return a year. If we delay it to 70, we get a higher benefit, but that's 3 years less that we can receive it in income. So you personally, depending on where you're at, you may need to take a smaller benefit to retire earlier, or if you can delay it, then you could potentially get more. So it's funny, we always kind of talk about like, what's the future look like? How are we going to fix Social Security? There's a lot of different things that we could do. Gosh, the government could say, hey, let's allow individuals to invest some of their current Social Security taxes in personal retirement accounts, or let's raise the current payroll tax or raise the current ceiling of wages. There's a lot of things that could happen, but ultimately some of the things they could do, as we mentioned, is they could reduce the future benefits, especially for people who are more wealthy, maybe only provide this based on an income scale, or they could change the benefit formula. So that's used to calculate benefits. So it ends up being lower for folks, or maybe changing how the annual cost of living adjustments happen. So there's a lot of things that could happen, but I cannot see this potentially being, the opposite direction where it's going to be a better benefit for us, right? So just, you want to keep in mind that this is definitely there for you. You're paying into this, but it's not necessarily meant to be your sole retirement vehicle. So I'll talk to you about kind of what our savings looks like. And there's two different periods of, when we're thinking about building up that nest egg, and then when we start taking distributions. And so, one of the things is the accumulation period. We start growing those assets over time, investing them and growing them. And then there comes a period when we actually need to start drawing from this account to pay ourselves in retirement. And that's known as the distribution period. And, there's different ways that we could do this. Number one, you could just have it in an account, and as you need the money, draw from that account. Or you could, kind of set yourself up. Well, I know what my budget is in retirement. I'm going to take that money out each month from that retirement, and then hope that, that drawdown, I don't run out of money before then. Another thing you can do is you could potentially insure it or partially insure it, where you take that lump sum and you basically put it into an annuity product that can give you a guarantee rate of return or guarantee income that won't, it'll guarantee that it won't run out because of that insurance. So there's some different ways we can do that, but ultimately there's this period of time of accumulation and then the distribution period, which is the part that we're planning for. So if I'm trying to withdraw this money and not run out, I have to kind of think about how long I need to be able to have this drawdown. So again, if I could be potentially living 30 years in retirement, I want to try not to run out of money before 30 years. And so this is actually showing some projections based on market performance of a portfolio, what we would call 40-60. 40-60 basically means that about 40% of our portfolio is invested in stocks and 60% is in bonds and cash. So in a portfolio like that, it gives us a balance that we can still get a little bit of growth, but it's not so aggressive that that we're subject to a lot of volatility. This is looking at a balance of $1 million. So maybe I've accumulated that, but it really doesn't matter how much I've saved up. The number that we really want to focus on is the percentage of that amount that I can withdraw every year and then not run out. So in the chart on the left, it actually shows that 3 scenarios. So each of these lines represent different scenarios. If I were to draw down 6% a year, how long would that money last before I went to zero? And the projection comes out that it will probably get me to about 23 years. But if I change it to 5%, so I'm going to take 5% a year of my balance, and I'm going to draw that down, then I can make that last 30 years. And then if I actually use the calculation of 4%, that actually goes further. And so I have a very low risk of running out if I withdraw 4% of that balance a year. So if we know that I need, for example, $2,000 a month, or, for my retirement, then I could maybe back into that number and say, well, that's 24,000 a year, and then 24,000 divided by 4%, and that's going to tell me how much I need to save to get to that number. So 4%, very conservative number that you're unlikely to run out of money. So projected outcomes for various portfolios. This is the right chart, kind of looks at how aggressive we should be. And again, the 60-40 that I mentioned, it actually ends up being the best projected investment as well. So having a little bit of exposure to stocks, but not too much, definitely has shown over different Monte Carlo scenarios to show that will make our money last. Now looking at retirement income options in your defined contribution plan. So that's going to be, again, those qualified plans through your employer, or an IRA account is also a qualified plan. So you have different options on taking distributions from those plans. You can either take those distributions once you reach 59 and a half. So if you're actually younger than 59 and a half, you're going to have to pay a 10% penalty to the IRS. So it's really important that all of your savings in any qualified plan stays in there until we get to retirement. That's what it's meant for. You know what? If something happens, you have to dip into it. It's your money, but keep in mind, you're going to have to pay 10% of that penalty to the IRS, plus any kind of taxes. But if you reach 59 and a half, you can actually take that money at any time, and whether that's retirement, distributions and whatnot. You can take distributions through periodic payments. That's like what I said, where you could kind of pay yourself a set monthly amount. So periodically you would receive a check. Some people do that monthly, sometimes they do that quarterly, but it's actually just set up in the plan to automatically send me those checks. You can also do it through a lump sum. So if you go to retire, you could just withdraw all that money out of the plan. It's really a good idea if you roll that over into an IRA or another qualified plan, just simply because otherwise you're going to pay taxes on the whole lump sum. And it's better to just pay those taxes as you are paying yourself in retirement. There is something called required minimum distributions, or also known as RMDs. Those are potentially on the table for some changes, but at age 72, if you're not working, you are required to take a minimum distribution. And that basically gets calculated for you and sent on your behalf. And then based on the lifetime annuity table, 3 to 4% a year, you could, make those distributions. And then if you delay, you can delay those RMDs, like I said, if you're continuing to work. So if you're still working for the company, there's no requirement to take that. So if you're still working at 72, you don't have to worry about taking those distributions. And then let's talk about healthcare. Healthcare is really, really important that we consider, because even though we're going to have the opportunity to take Medicare, there is still going to be cost to our healthcare. So just Medicare is not completely free. and all of the services that come along from Medicare, they're still out-of-pocket expenses. So looking at the different options that you have for healthcare in retirement, certainly some folks may continue to take COBRA. COBRA is where you actually leave your employer. So this can happen if you left for any reason. You have the option of taking COBRA, but this is also something potentially available when you retire. So it's offered to you for 18 months after your employment. So if you really like the plan you're on, you want to continue to be on that, you can carry COBRA. Typically, you're going to pay a higher amount because you're no longer an employee. You don't get the benefit of the employer paid portion, but that is something you could potentially do. So if you decided to retire early and you're not old enough for Medicare yet, you could, this could be an option. Medicare is something that you're automatically entitled to when you turn 65. You're automatically going to be enrolled in Part A if you are receiving Social Security benefits. So you may or may not know that Medicare actually has 4 different parts. They have Part A, B, C, and D. A is going to be your hospital-only insurance, your home health care, inpatient, or hospice insurance. And then Part B, that's going to be like your office visits. So when I go to the doctor, or if I need to get labs or x-rays, physical therapy, that's going to be covered under Part B. Part C is what we call Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage is typically available to most participants that are within a, like a major city. So the Dallas-Fort Worth area, or other major cities are going to have access. If you're in a rural area, sometimes they're less available. But basically, it's kind of like it's a Medicare plan that is sponsored through another company like a Aetna or United Healthcare, or other types of options. And those plans can have less out-of-pocket costs. Some of them have more attractive benefits on prescriptions. So it's kind of like entering the marketplace for different types of health insurance. It's Medicare sponsored. So that's another part of Medicare. And then Part D is your prescription drug plans. So that Part C I talked about, the Medicare Advantage, it could potentially encompass all of your A, B, and D. Or you could just have a plan that just covers, office visits. Just depends on what you choose. But there's actually 4 separate parts of Medicare, and you have to actually sign up for B, C, or D. Long-term care, this is some kind of policy that you could take out even in your working years. You could actually take it out to cover if you ever have in-home care needed, or if you ever needed to go to an assisted living facility or nursing home, that long-term care insurance can help cover expenses like that, because those can be quite costly. And another thing that we should note is, depending on where we live, healthcare costs can certainly differ. So what's interesting is this is just looking at the cost of nursing home care, different parts of the country, but it's pretty well correlated to the expenses that we have of, in retirement, what those healthcare expenses could be. So for example, if I live in, in one of these states that is orange, like Alaska or Washington or Maine, I'm going to have probably higher healthcare costs as compared to someone who lives in Oklahoma, because different parts of the country do have higher expenses of healthcare. So something else to keep in mind too, when we're thinking about our budget and where we're going to live in retirement, and what our needs are going to be for healthcare. So that's pretty much kind of the high level of, most of the information about, retirement needs and things that we need to be thinking about. So certainly our takeaways here is, you want to make sure you're determining what your retirement income or lifestyle replacement needs are. Kind of find the most efficient way for you to save for retirement, either through work or on your own through your own savings or IRAs. You want to, hopefully that you were able to understand some of the different types of retirement savings vehicles that we have available. Leverage your employer-sponsored retirement plans. That makes it super easy for those payroll deductions. Also faster for you to realize those tax benefits, because If you're doing pre-tax, it's going to come out, you're not going to pay taxes on that money right away. Understand Social Security basics. Hopefully this was helpful to kind of help understand what Social Security looks like. Understand where your retirement income is sourced, manage that appropriately. And hopefully you were able to kind of understand, we've got to certainly calculate those distribution strategies, 4, maybe 5%, in that, back into that number for yourself to kind of help planning how much I need to save. And then also keep in mind healthcare cost and retirement. So something else you need to consider as well. So I think we still have some time to take some questions.
Yes, ma'am, Kim. So we actually have one. Didn't want to interrupt, but we have Ms. Barbara mentioned. So what's the biggest difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA?
So a traditional IRA is going to be where you can contribute into the plan, and every dollar that you contribute, you can actually deduct from your taxes. So basically you kind of get the benefit of a tax deduction for those contributions. Now, what happens is that money in the traditional is going to go in pre-tax, but then when we go to take it out in retirement, we're going to pay the taxes on those distributions, just like ordinary income. However, if I do a Roth means I'm not going to get a tax deduction for that contribution. I'm just going to be able to put it in there, and the cost is the cost. No benefit today. But the benefit of the Roth is it's actually going to be protected in that all of the growth on the investments of that Roth plan is going to come out to me in retirement completely tax-free. So, the difference here is, do I need to save on my taxes today because I think my taxes are going to be less in the future? Or maybe I have a long time. The longer I have till retirement means the more I can save, right? So if I talked about like the time value of money, maybe I'd rather save all those taxes I would potentially have to pay on that growth. The Roth could be a better solution. So it's whether I want to pay taxes now or pay taxes later. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, thank you. And then, so is it the same when it comes to like a 401k? Can your employer match you on a Roth or traditional IRA?
Absolutely. So keep in mind, now, whether you put it into pre-tax or Roth inside of 401k, it still is eligible for matching under the terms of your plan. So everyone's plan is different for matching. However, every contribution your employer does is going to be pre-tax for the employer. So even if you're doing Roth, you're still going to have to pay taxes on the growth of those dollars on the employer's contribution.
Okay, awesome. No, thank you. And then I actually, page 10, we have a question. Ms. White mentioned you were discussing like saving the $100 biweekly that equaled out to about 106,000 in 20 years. And so what type of saving was that? Are we kind of just giving an example of compounding? Now, me personally, I consider compounding the 8th wonder of the world because it's amazing how it works, but it does take some time. And so getting a visual, people love that. And so can you explain a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yes, I'm trying to find my slide. I feel like I passed it.
Yeah.
There it is.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So this actually is using an assumption of 7%. So if I look at the different years in the market, obviously we don't get the same return every year. But for example, 2019, we had over 30% return in the US equity markets. 2020, we had a pandemic. We actually went into a recession. So in March, we saw a drastic fall in the markets because the economy shut down. Everybody was on lockdown. Businesses were closed. However, if you stayed invested, and I hope you did, you would have seen that we came right back up. And so actually in 2020, from January 1st to December 31st, markets performed over 20% in the US markets in 2020. So despite that volatility, we stayed the course, right? In 2021, we had 20.4% return in US equity markets. However, I will say we don't see that every year. So far this year, it's been a little bit of a drag. I think I looked at my 401k recently and I was down like 2% for the year. So we're going to have those ups and downs. And what we hope for is that, over the period of time, we want to get an average, around 7%. So this is actually saying that an on average 7% a year, that this is kind of what that compounding, but that's a good, good point. It's one of those things where it's like a snowball. The longer it's invested, the faster it grows, the more that it grows.
Yeah, no, thank you. Definitely thank you for explaining that. And then we were talking about distributions and how, depending on the age, if you withdraw or you decided to withdraw earlier, you get a lower amount. And so someone had a question about, if you retire early and receive less, do you receive the full amount once you get to your actual age, or you keep what you've been receiving?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do, when we start taking distributions from Social Security, you lock that number in, and that's the number you get for the rest of your life. So if you take it early and you have to take it at a lesser value, then that's the amount you're going to get for indefinitely. It doesn't bump up when we get to that next age. So unfortunately, that's the one thing about Social Security is once you pull that trigger, you can't undo it. It's like toothpaste. You squeeze it out, it's not going to go back in. It's done. That's what you get. So, so it's definitely important that you're considering that. You should be able to see, if you log into the socialsecurity.gov website, like I can log in and I can see my pay history, and it'll show me a projection of here's what my benefit will be. And it'll tell you, what's my benefit if I were to become disabled today? What's that payment going to look like? Or what's that going to look like if I have early retirement? So you can actually see those numbers today, but they will, if you retire early, that's the number that you're going to lock in at. Great question.
Thank you, Kim. And then we have one in the Q&A. They say, can you talk a little bit more about the health savings account and what are your conditions to open one? If you can speak about that a little bit.
I would love to. I could go on another hour about health savings accounts, and I know we don't have that today, but I'll tell you a couple of things to know. First of all, for a health savings account or an HSA, this is not to be confused with an FSA or flexible spending account. So flexible spending accounts are those accounts that you have to use that same year. So that's the one that if you have a balance in December and it's almost the end of the year, I start going out trying to figure out how much how much medicine I can buy at the pharmacy, or I need a new pair of glasses just to use that money up. An HSA does not have that requirement that you liquidate it. You actually can grow that money. So you can continue to contribute into the HSA on a pre-tax basis. So we're not paying taxes on any of the money that goes into that account. And then, once we have accumulated at least $2,000, some plans will let you do it at $1,000, but most plans are $2,000. You can actually invest it. So you can put it into an investment inside your HSA and grow it just like you do your 401k. Now, to be eligible for an HSA, you have to have a high deductible health plan. So it actually has to follow the high deductible health plan rules. So you must be covered under one of those plans. The family deduction on that, if you have a family that could be a couple or with children, it's like $7,000 is the amount I can contribute every year. And the way I look at it is I participate in one. I save to the maximum amount every paycheck. I put as much as I can in the HSA. When I go to the doctor and the doctor says it's $50 for the visit today, then I will just try to, if I can, just pay with my credit card or pay with my debit card. If I can afford to do that, I'll try to do that so I can save that money in the HSA and let it grow, just like my 401k. But then I'm going to keep that receipt. Because the good news is there is no limitation of when or expiration for those receipts. So if I shoebox all of my receipts from every doctor's visit or every time I go to the pharmacy and buy Tylenol or anything like that, and there's apps on your cell phones, your smartphones, you can download called the Shoebox app that you can take pictures of these receipts and save them, but you collect those and then turn them in. Every bit of that comes out is completely tax-free. So an HSA is better than a 401k, better than an IRA because it's triple tax benefit. It goes in pre-tax, it grows tax-free, it comes out tax-free as long as it's used for medical expenses. And we're going to have lots of medical expenses in retirement. Now, if you do take it out for other expenses in retirement, just like you need it for income, You can do that too. And then it's just like your 401k, it's ordinary income. There's no penalty, but obviously there's a great benefit to the tax-free. It grows tax-free, and then you can pay those medical expenses with tax-free dollars.
No, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I actually do know about the HSA. I currently tore my Achilles, so I actually been getting reimbursed from my HSA because I haven't grown the amount of how much I pay in physical therapy. So firsthand, I've had the experience where it has been helpful. So thank you for explaining that. It's been great. Definitely, if your job offers it, get it. If not, like she said, it hit 3 buckets, right? Who doesn't like to save some money? And I'm actually going to go with the question that someone brought up earlier. What is your take on, robo investing or investing other, like personal, investing, right? Like someone doesn't have a 401k or is not ready to jump into that, how can they get comfortable? We heard apps of like Robinhood, Acorn, and, you can kind of play with some of your money that you might have. What is your take? Or do you still think they should have an IRA or a 401k if they're in that type of, field? Or do you think they should kind of work it out depending on what the situation is?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say everything is helpful. I actually, have my 401k, I have my IRAs. I also play on Robinhood, and I work in the industry. So like, I think that that's great, but our Robinhood account is probably not going to replace our income in retirement. So there's definitely no replacement for the tax benefits you can get from an IRA or from a 401k, through your employer. But having those extra accounts, that's part of that other side of the picture, the personal savings. The other thing to keep in mind is risk tolerance. So, when we're in qualified plans like retire, like a 401k or 403b, typically we have mutual funds that we invest in. So we're not necessarily buying like straight into one stock. Where like on Robinhood, I might go out there and speculate and try to buy stocks, and hopefully they grow. And that's great. Stocks are good, and stocks are part of our mutual funds. But typically mutual funds help spread that risk. So we're not just buying one stock, we're actually like spreading out that risk. When I think about spreading risk and diversification, it's like 2 elevators, like one elevator that has one cable holding it up, and then there's another elevator that has 5 cables holding it up. Well, which one do you want to be in an earthquake? Well, I would rather be in the one with 5, because if one cable breaks, I'm going down. So if that one stock I'm invested in does horrible, that company goes under, they bankrupt, the value of the stock is nothing, I've lost everything. Where if I've got 5 different, or in mutual funds, hundreds of companies, I'm kind of invested in the growth. And if one goes down, everything else kind of keeps me afloat. So it's definitely good to think about, the investment vehicles and how, they kind of help manage that risk for me. But also there's nothing wrong with, kind of setting up some extra money on the side that we're also saving and investing for long-term, with those kinds of apps. So there's lots of great tools out there. Nowadays you could find lots of great information. It's, cheap to invest. It's easy to have accounts like that. And then they also really give you a lot of information about how to invest.
For sure. No, awesome. Thank you, Ms. Kim. And again, that is great because we love free education, free information about financial literacy. I hope you guys are having a great time, and I hope you guys had a good day today. Definitely learning about investing. We talked about investing for your kids with 529 plans, UPMA accounts, and of course, we also talked about legacy when it comes to retirement, and definitely building with life insurance and what other knots. But Ms. Kim, thank you so much. We like to thank everyone that participated today. We want to give a thank you to Ms. Kim. So definitely say thank you in the chat. We'd love for you guys to let her know how much you guys appreciated today's webinar. Let you guys know we're halfway through the week. I hope you guys enjoying it so far. Tomorrow we have Ms. Ebola with Clever Finance, Clever Girl. She'll be our main event on Thursday at noon. So definitely hope you guys can enjoy, and I hope you guys have a good evening. You guys take care, and thank you guys for joining us this evening.